You're back. You were describing your first job.
Yeah. On my first job, I knew a friend who was a cook in what was a small department store. It wasn't a fancier one, but it was a lesser one. And I got the job. My first job was as a cook's helper. And I remember very clearly it was $10 a week, and we worked 6 days a week, about 12 hours a day, every morning from 6 till 6 at night. And I did that job for, I don't know, possibly a year, a little bit more. And then a job opened up as a shipping and receiving clerk. And boy, was that good, because the pay jumped from $10 to $15.75. So I became the shipping and receiving clerk there.
Where was this?
It was in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. Yeah, right on Main Street.
Yeah.
It was. It wasn't like the Macy's kind of store was next door, but this was like a next step down, where it was a little bit less expensive. Maybe like nowadays it would be a Target or something. Yeah. And after I worked there for a few years, maybe it wasn't that long, because my folks knew a Russian family. It lived in Quincy, Mass., and they all worked in the Belgium Steel Shipyard in Quincy Point. And they were all riveters and drillers, and it was hard work, but they said that they were looking for people. So I went to Quincy, Mass., and they told me where to go, and I just went down and applied. And Quincy's probably about 40 miles from Woonsocket. So I applied for a job, and then I got a job, and I became a chipper and caulker.
Now, how old are you when you got that job?
I was probably 21 years old.
So you're looking at about 1940 or so?
Probably early 1940. Early 1940. Yes, because, yeah, that's right. And so I went to work as a chipper and caulker, and it was pretty hard work, but the pay was very good. We got paid piecework, and if you worked hard, you could make a good piece of change. And I was there. I was taught to work hard, and I did. And what we did, we worked on aircraft carriers, we worked on heavy cruisers, and I worked also on a USS Massachusetts, a battleship. And the caulker, after you put the rivets in the ship, and the plates are now pretty tight, but then you have to make them tighter still, and you take, and with a tool and an air hammer, you blend the seam between the plates so that it's even more watertight, and you do the same thing on the flat rivets. And so it's hard work, and you had a lot of jarring in your body, but I was young and I didn't mind it, and the pay was very good, and that's what I did. And I received 3 deferments of 6 months each, and then I was classified in, I think I was classified in 1A in 1942, August of 1942, and then they finally called my number on June 24th of 1943.
Let me ask you something, a couple of things about this job. When you went to the Quincy Shipyard, did you commute from your home to go to work up there?
No, it was too far. Didn't have a car, and at that time they weren't making any more cars. And so what I did is I boarded with this Russian family for a while, and then I found another family that was closer, and they had also be a Russian family, and they were. The man of the house was also a riveter. That's probably how I met him, and he had a son who worked there as a chipper and caulker. So that's what I spent. I boarded with them and spent my time. So I left home when I was probably about 19, maybe 19, getting close to 20 years old. I left home.
Were you sending money back to your parents?
I sent a little money back to the parents. Yes, I would do that. Yeah, and that was part of the deal. And but the job paid well, and we were close to Boston, and I had a good time. You only had to work 6 months on 3 to 11, and even though it was hot in summer, cold in winter, but the money was very good. And as I say, I got deferred street time, so I would have gone into service 2 years sooner, or actually more than 2 years sooner, had it not been for the deferments and working there.
When you got the job at the shipyard in 1940 or 40, so was the Quincy Shipyard strictly doing military work even then?
Yes. The Quincy yard was doing a lot of the heavy work. I worked on a number of aircraft carriers and also on a number of cruisers, and I don't remember the names anymore because when we worked on them, they sometimes didn't even have a name. You just told you to report the shipway number 5 or 4 or whatever it was. But they also, in another section yard, made destroyers. But I never went over there. I always worked on the heavy stuff.
And how many days a week did you work there during how many days a week were you working at the shipyard?
Well, there was plenty of overtime. I'm sure I worked many 6 days in overtime. Whenever something would come up, yes, there was overtime involved, and we worked hard. In fact, my whole family worked. My father, in the plant that he was working in, was making Navy and Army material for uniforms, the cloth for the uniforms. And my mother actually worked in a cotton mill, and then she switched to a rubber mill. And I found out just a couple of years ago that she may have been working on the secret rubber tanks and airplanes and trucks that were placed in southern England to confuse the Germans. But I don't know that she knew what she was doing at, because she may have been doing a part of it. But we found out later that actually in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, the rubber company there was secretly making these rubber inflatable tanks and so forth. And my sister, she worked as a clerk in the machine shop. So everybody in the family, and most families, contributed. That was sort of a different war.
Yeah, very much so. You're and the money you made, all right, were you able to save some? Did you spend it? What did you do?
Well, I lived it up pretty good, but I was pretty thrifty. I saved a good bit of that money, and because there wasn't a lot you could do, but I did things. I would go to Boston to dances and shows, and I bought skis. I skied up in New Hampshire. So I did the things that we all did, and went out with the guys and stuff. But yeah, I was able to save some money because I was making a lot of money. And that's all. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
You know, where do you remember? And did you, as far as like eating, did you bring your lunch with you to the shipyard every day?
Yeah.
Is that how you would do it? You would.
Yeah. Part of the deal was, I don't remember what I paid this lady, but she was. You'll find that people of foreign extraction are mainly pretty damn good cooks, and this lady was a good cook, and because we all worked hard, she had very big, good meals, and she made the lunches for us, and that was all part of the deal of paying, you know, for staying with her. And they sort of accept me as part of the family. I had my own room, and I would go out with her sons. She had 2 sons. One worked, I think they both worked the shipyard. Then later on, the younger son transferred to the telephone company, and they retired that way. But yeah, it was, and they would pack lunches, and you had a lunch box, and you loaded up because you worked very hard, and it was outdoors, and in the summertime very hot, wintertime miserably cold sometimes, but we just worked. That's all.
You had to work. Tough. Where do you recall you were when Pearl Harbor happened?
Well, I can recall that when Pearl Harbor happened, I was in Woonsocket, because I would go back to Woonsocket periodically, and I would take the train from. Oh, it was a heck of a trip. You had to take a streetcar to Boston, and then there's some place where you transfer it to a subway, and then to the South Station, and then from there to Blackstone, Mass, and then than home. So I would go home sometimes on weekend to be some of my friends there too. And our entertainment those times were going to the dances. That's where all the girls were, and we would go to dances. And I remember there must have been very good times. In fact, they were great times because we were able to sometimes go to dances where the big bands played. I remember seeing the Glenn Miller and the Benny Goodman and the Tommy Dorseys and all those bands we saw either at the movies, or I can remember Glenn Gray, seeing Glenn Gray, and even locally there were bands that would copy the styles of the different orchestras, and we went to dances. That was the only entertainment you had, because there was no radio, or maybe just a little bit of a radio. There was no television. There was no cars. And what we would do is we would somehow or other, by that time my dad had a car, and we would borrow a car and we'd pitch in for gas and we'd go to dances out of town or wherever. But we had a good time in spite of everything.
Mm-hmm. And subsequent to Pearl Harbor, you were thinking about what happened. Did you figure your number was going to come up and you were going to be going in? Did you want to enlist?
Well, no, I had not the feeling to enlist. In fact, I think most of the fellas that I knew, we just waited for the draft, because well, the fact of the matter is, a lot of men had already been taken, because we got drafted before Pearl. Some of the guys got drafted before Pearl Harbor. In fact, they picked the numbers before Pearl Harbor, and of course, it wasn't long before all the young people were gone. They just would draft hundreds and hundreds at a time from each town, so that everybody was going. We were all at the age of draft age. I was probably, let's see, I had to be 20, 21 or 22, so we all, it wasn't long before we were all gone.
Now, when your deferment finally came up and you had to go in, tell me about that. What happened? How did that all place out?
Well, I had applied. When I became 1A,
mm-hmm.
I had gone down to the Naval, I don't know what you call it, I guess, recruitment place, and filled out an application, and I had an application.
Mm-hmm.
But I was pressing my luck, and if I keep working, I'm making money, and I'm not in the service. I knew I was going to go, but I didn't know when. And then all of a sudden, about the time I got my notice, I went down to the Navy, and they says, "Too late. You already got your you got your notice to go in, so you're done. You got to go in the Army." But I tried to get in the Navy, mm-hmm. but it was already too late.
So off you went. Where it happened first? Where?
Well, I had registered in Quincy, because that's where I was living at the time, and so all the fellas that were drafted in New England would go to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and that's where I went. I was picked, I think, on June 24th to go. And they gave me a week or so already, and I think I reported to the on July 7th is when I went to Fort Devens. And when you go to Fort Devens at that time, they would give you a series of tests, and physical and mental tests. And when they gave the test, apparently I scored pretty good. So while there the first couple of days, then I took a further test to join the Air Force. That was when the Army, it wasn't called the Air Corps, the Army Air Force, because it belonged to the Army. And so I passed the physical, and I passed the mental test, so then they sent me up to Nashville, New Hampshire, Grenier Field, New Hampshire, for the flight surgeon physical. And I could not pass the depth perception test. So they sent me back to Fort Devens, and 7 days later they just sent me back up, because they needed pilots. And so they sent me back up, and I take the test again. And I couldn't pass it well enough, then they shipped me back to Devens. the third time I went up there, they finally, I believe I asked the major, why can't I pass this test and why won't they take me? So he told me, he said, well, son, if you come in for a landing and you're tired, you're either going to undershoot or overshoot the field. So I said, no, thank you. But anyway, when I went back that time to Fort Devens, they assigned me to the infantry and I went to Texas.
So this time they assigned you to the infantry.
Yeah.
All right. So now, you haven't had any basic training at this point?
No.
No.
No. When you're at that point, there was no basic training. They gave you details, whether it be KP or clean up or whatever, and because you were hanging around, most of the people only were there for 1 or 2 days, and once they got their tests, they decided where they're going. And I think a lot of it is a sort of a, like a raffle. If you were in there and they want 100 cooks, then you become 100 cooks. And if they want 100 truck drivers, that's where you go. So I guess by that time, it was infantry, and that's where I went to Texas.
Now, when you went to describe getting to Texas, where was your destination in Texas that you were being sent to?
Well, they put us on a train, and it took a couple of days, and we wound up in Camp Fannin, Texas. It's not far from Dallas, and I can remember the closest towns, because I did get a pass a couple of times. One town was Gladewater, and another was Tyler, Texas. And they were not too far from Dallas, but I never did get to Dallas. But we did get to these small towns just on a weekend pass.
The camp was again called Camp what?
Camp Fannin, F-A-N-N-I-N. It was a camp that was strictly made up to train infantry troops, and it was strictly infantry.
What time of year was this that you went to Camp Fannin?
Camp Fannin, probably it had to be about the 1st of August.
1940.
43.
August of 1943.
Yeah.
Do you know why you were sent all the way to Texas for that? Why not someplace on the East Coast?
I don't know why. I really don't. Except this was an enormous camp. It was. It had I can remember. It had like a regimental mess hall where there were thousands and thousands of GIs, and it was called a 17-week infantry program that we went through. But why we were sent there, I don't know. Because I just don't know.
Did the train that took you across the country, or was it a troop train?
It was a troop train. Yeah, you sat all the way.
You sat all the way? You were in uniform at this point?
Yeah, you were issued uniforms. We had uniforms, and we had no Army experience. We were just raw, and we went down to Texas, yeah.
Was everybody a private at that point? Is that what you're...
Oh, yeah, all privates. Yeah, we were all privates.
Uh-huh.
And when we got to Texas, then we were assigned to companies and then platoons, and then we trained. We trained for 17 weeks.
So tell me what it's like. First of all, what's the weather like there?
The weather was hot because we got there in August. Hot, and the soil was kind of like sandy. And I think I remember one thing. I remember they grew roses, like to be shipped out to replant it someplace. And it's sandy, hot. You would get sudden thunderstorms, and it was hot.
So, does the train take you right to the camp? Do you remember having a...
That I can't remember. I think it probably came close to the camp. No, I don't remember that part of it. I do remember stopping on periodically for a break that we get off the train. But I remember it took a couple of days to get there.
When you arrive at this camp, what's it like? What do they tell you to do? How's it work?
Well, as far as I know, when we got there, they're gonna try to make a soldier out of you, and they are very very sure to make you do everything just their way. Whether it's drilling, you have to do close order drill. We have to police the area. We have to wash our own clothes. You have to keep the whole place clean. You got details like latrine detail. You got KP duty. And when you're on KP, they call you about 4 o'clock in the morning, and you didn't get back till 10 o'clock at night because it was whatever, and you were assigned either peeling vegetables and then washing pots and so forth, cleaning the mess that the guys made after they eat, and you were there for like about 16 hours.
It's a long day.
Yeah, it was tough.
What kind of quarters did you stay in Camp Fannin?
Well, they had barracks, wooden barracks.
Yeah. And
as I remember, they had double bunks. I'm not sure how many people there, but it would fill up the whole place. I would probably guess they were probably a platoon in a barrack.
A platoon?
Yeah, I would think that there was probably close to a platoon in a barrack, yeah.
What time would they get you up in the morning?
Probably about 6 o'clock, and you'd have to hurry up and wash and get dressed. And they taught you how to do everything in double time quick, and there's never enough latrines, there's never enough washing space, so if you got there early, you could get cleaned up quick, and because everything had a time, and if breakfast is at 7 o'clock, you better be there because they're going off to breakfast, and they march you to breakfast, and you have your breakfast, and then you'd come on back, and then you'd drill, and they did give you like a 10-minute break every hour, but you were pretty much on the go 8 hours a day.
Now, did they, who's in charge of you? Is it a sergeant? Is it a lieutenant?
There were a whole bunch of sergeants, and they were probably regular Army, because they all were tough, and they just, whatever it was never good enough. Like if you cleaned your rifle, they'd say, well, that's not really clean, or whatever. If you had the latrine, they'd come by and they'd always find something wrong, so you had to, they made you really work hard, yeah.
They're training. And describe for us what you mean by regular Army.
Well, I think there's always been a sort of distinction between, like the regular Army guys were, maybe they were tougher or whatever, because I guess because at this point, there's only the recruits and this cadre that's there, and they're there, and every 17 weeks they get a new bunch. So that's so they turn over whatever that is 3 times a year, and they have a squad, and they have platoons just like you have later on, and then they have companies and a battalion, so that you do exercises on an individual basis, you do it on a squad basis, and you do it on a platoon basis. And then they even had, later on, we would do company exercises. But you drilled, you ran, you had phys ed, they had classes, they taught you how to take a gun apart, put it together again, you fired on the range, you learn how to fire an M1, you learn how to fire a carbine, you learn how to fire a machine gun, you learn how to fire a pistol, which I never could do good. Machine gun, they taught you how to throw grenades, they showed you how to use a bayonet, they made you wrestle a little bit, you went through a gas drill, you went through everything. You had marches, small marches, you had runs. I think what they did is they made you from maybe a soft, guy as a civilian to a pretty tough guy by the time they finished with all that exercise and routine and things that they made you do.
When was the first time you recall firing a weapon? Was it the first time you fired a weapon, by the way?
Yeah, I never fired a weapon unless it was a BB gun or something. My dad would not allow a gun. He was not that way. And so I might have fired one that somebody else had. And I believe before you would get the gun, they made sure that you knew how to clean it, you knew how to handle it, you had a lot of drill, you had close order drill, you had rifle drill where you had all these different formations, you had to learn how to present arms and do all that exercise, march with a rifle. And then when you started, they took you out on the range, and actually you fired from a prone position, you fired from a sitting position, you fired from a standing position, and they kept all the scores, and then they kept, and you fired quite a bit, and you fired each weapon as you went along.
How did you do?
I did good. I was a good shot, and I guess I was a sharpshooter in rifle. I think I was a sharpshooter machine gun. I think I was a sharpshooter in carbine, and those are your main weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And I can even remember hitting targets at 500 yards. But because they wanted me in the Air Force so bad, I think my eyesight was very good. It was better than normal eyesight that I had.
Well, that's actually a good advantage, you know.
Yeah.
Now your marches, did you have, how far? What kind of marches did you have to do?
Well, they had different marches. It would be wherever you went, you marched in formation. If it was out to the rifle range, which might be a mile away or 2 miles away, you marched there, and then you'd have maybe a 5 or 10 mile march, and then towards the end of the whole exercise, they put you on a big long march. I don't remember, it was 15 or 18 miles or something like that. It was pretty bad, pretty bad.
Yeah.
But I think what happens is you're in a group and you become very familiar, and you're sort of with these same guys every day, and then you don't want to let the guys down, so everybody tries their hardest to do it, and you find out that most of the guys will make it.
Good.
Yeah.
Do you know where you're going to be going at this point?
No, we have no idea, except we know in infantry, we know that it's either going to be the Pacific or Europe. We knew that.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I believe in December we finished.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were shipped to Fort Meade. And
was it the whole unit that went to Fort Meade?
no, it wasn't. I do remember that some of the fellas went with me, because I can remember some of the names and some of the fellas that I was with. But how they did this, I don't know. But I wound up at Fort Meade, and with some of the people that I knew. And we were at Fort Meade, and a few days they gave us a pass to go home, and then we came back, and we stayed at Fort Meade for probably, I'm going to say, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. I did get a chance to get into town in Baltimore,
Mm-hmm.
and I can remember it was at the holidays. I think I was in Baltimore at Christmas time, and I even had dinner at one of the families that took us in, and we had dinner with them, and it was on Christmas time. I can remember going down Charles Street at Christmas time, and a lot of the stores had open houses. We'd go in there and have some snacks and drinks. Wow. I can remember that very clearly, going down Charles Street.
So this would have been, you would have been about 24 years old at this time, toward Christmas in 1943?
Let's see, that was 43. Yep, I was 24, yeah.
Now, and did you also feel that age difference when you were in basic training? A lot of the guys younger than you, were they all similar ages?
Many of the guys were younger. There was, most of the guys were younger, I would say, yeah. I was one of the older guys, but it didn't seem like there was any differentiation. I didn't notice any different. Yeah.
Do you think the fact that you had that experience working at the shipyard toughened you in preparation for basic training?
Oh yeah, I probably believe I was in very good shape. Yeah, I think so. And the fact that I was more mature, yeah, it helped all along. I think so. Yeah.
What happened at the end of December '43? What happened then?
Well, after a period, right after Christmas, we were shipped up to New York on the Hudson, and that camp was named Camp Shanks. Mm-hmm. And that was the camp where they sent up men that was going to embark from New York for Europe. And it was up the river from New York City. Somewhere probably pretty close to West Point, but I can't remember West Point. But I remember we were there. I somehow or other 21 days seems to strike me, because, again, I don't know why, but I was given the job of writing passes for the company that I was with, and I made sure that I get a pass, and I believe that I went into New York on pass 18 days out of the 21. I had to send home for money about 3 times.
You went down into the city.
Yeah, we would go down on a train, down on a Jersey side, and somewhere around, maybe it was around Hoboken or someplace. It was somewhere around the 40th Street. So I don't know, it was 42nd, 44th, and I can remember we'd get across the river in a ferry, and then we'd go down Broadway and visit at different places.